This is actually just going to be a short one, but it's a follow-up on the longer post I just made, and I think it's a good example. So now I think people are starting to pay attention more with the rise of crypto. Stephanie sent me some text about Musk, and of course we have Thiel and these various people, the people who are aligning with Trump and the crypto stuff, which again, we have to start paying attention to. Is it going to shift towards the focus just on money into tokenizing other assets, which is, again, Leo has laid that ground very thoroughly the last few years. And there was like a, again, I keep saying that we tell stories. When we tell stories with the frameworks and the information that we have at hand, and it changes over time. And so there was a tweet with someone who was like, oh, look, in the context of crypto and even sort of addressing some of the blockchain wellness, that using the term technocracy. And if you followed me for a while, really one of my very first videos I did, even before Jason showed up, it was a presentation that I was supposed to give to a woman that I had met who was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they had been keeping an eye on the UN, on the Conference on the Status of Women, and through a mutual friend, we had made a connection, and she had asked me to come to New York to give a speech about pay-for-success finance and social impact bonds and impacts on children and pregnant women, because they were really focused on women and children and how that overlapped with the larger United Nations Sustainable Development Goals approach. And so I had put together, a good talk, and this is before I really was doing a lot of public speaking on social impact bonds. And as we led into it, this was the spring of 2020, like February, and there was this panic. And I was like, well, whatever. I'm fine to take a bus up to New York if you guys don't come out and meet whoever is there. It doesn't matter. I can get to New York. It's no big deal. And of course, this was the week, like maybe 2 weeks before the lockdown started. And so as it turns out, I ended up writing a very long paper instead, because the whole thing got canceled because of the lockdowns. And I ended up doing a talk about it. And it was laying out all of the social impact finance, but it was missing big bits because there were huge things I didn't know, right? The more you know, the more you realize there are a lot of things that you didn't know. And so I think I even mentioned Howard Scott and technocracy. And the idea of a technocracy is that it is sort of society administered by experts and often with data. And this aligned very closely with what works government and social impact finance and cybernetics and essentially evolutionary economics and guided evolution, which I didn't know that piece at the time. But I laid this out in my initial presentation in 2020 because that's what I had to work with. I didn't know that I hadn't been introduced to these other concepts. And not that it's not important. It's a thing. It's a historical thing. It happened. It sets a certain tone. And I remember early on, Patrick Wood had reached out to me about one of my social impact bonds blogs and asked if he could repost it on his Technocracy blog. And I was like, well, sure, but it never happened. And then I later met Patrick at an event in Tucson, and he's a very nice guy, but he's definitely within a certain framework, a certain story. It's a very comfortable story. He's built over time a really nice, well-developed space in the technocracy movement. He's got publications on it, and his identity is defined by technocracy. And so if you tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, Patrick, there's some other stuff we should be thinking about, it's going to be really uncomfortable for Patrick to move out of this very robust space of technocracy that's been built, because that's his identity and that's his story. I'm saying this today not to rag on Patrick, but just to simply point out some of us stay in certain stories, and then some of us move through different stories and incorporate new things, as I mentioned in the other talk about clearing out your closet. And even though that purple sweater looked great on you, the time has come to move on and put that in the giveaway bin. And you can still love that sweater or love the photos of you in that sweater, but you're not that person anymore. You need to keep going. And so what I would say today is, as you're considering different narratives. And again, I'm not saying that the narrative that I'm using right now, which is primarily a lens of cybernetics and complexity theory and emergence and gamification and socio-technical cyber-physical systems, these are all things that are my lens now. There could be some other really fascinating other concepts that I have not encountered yet, right? And so when I encounter them, maybe some of them uphold the previous views that I have had, and then maybe some of them say, that complexity stuff, I know that back in the day you thought that that was the thing, but this actually seems more suited to the current conditions, and maybe you need to let some of that go. And hopefully I'm prepared to do that when the time comes. And so I do think, I just want to say, as we're thinking about how we're languaging the stories of what is happening, and again, making sense of what is happening, there's different lanes. And I'm not saying that if you're not in my story, you're a bad person or you're doing it wrong. I'm simply saying we should be aware that there's other stories and shop around among the stories and see which one seems to align best with your needs. Because to me, the technocracy idea very much aligns with they want to put you on blockchain and turn you into a puppet, which I kind of was maybe not strongly there, but a little more there when I started, because I didn't know about emergence. I didn't know about the participatory universe. I didn't know about the quantum field. I didn't really know that. I was kind of skeptical about all of the parapsychology or, psychokinetic things, or, I didn't know that history of SRI and the history of psychotronic warfare or, therapeutics beyond what they sell you as the, MK Ultra type of stuff. And so I wasn't prepared to really think about it that way. But where will the story that you inhabit take you? Is it a narrative that leaves the way open for you to have agency in your continuing story as an agent in this, whatever this is unfolding dramatic scenario? Or is it one that forecloses those opportunities? Because I think, and I will admit that I did this early on, not intentionally. I wasn't like, let me tell people a scary story and make them feel disempowered. That wasn't it, because I didn't know that there were other ways of doing it. But so technocracy, in my opinion, is something that says, here's this route. You're going to be governed by experts. The experts are eventually going to be AI. And it's to limit you, it's to control you and make you do things. Now, that's one way of doing it. And then you can be in that space and you can look around and go, oh, wow, who's part of this? Oh, it's like all of the world religions, institutions, and the banking systems, and all the corporations, and the civic infrastructure, and the philanthropies. And that's really not fun. And I think in many respects, that's why I'm sitting here on my own in Arkansas, because the people who are around me, who are my friends and my family, they didn't want to live in that space because it didn't really afford them any opportunities. I don't think they had the wherewithal to tell me outright, like, hey, Allison, when you say this, it makes me feel really uncomfortable. And I would just, at the time, I would have replied, but it's real. This is the real thing. I didn't know about storytelling and the free energy principle and how we interact with the quantum universe. So now I know differently. So you could pick the technocracy story, and that has consequences for the picking. I'm interested for now in the complexity story, because that's what intrigues me, is this idea of this protocol layer that is engineered as an overlay onto what we do naturally, and that it's guiding some outcome, which I feel like is some information processing or computational or puzzle solving outcome. And we navigate this space and the data is thrown off, and then there's some emergent property. And so I'm not saying I'm endorsing that or I think that sounds great. I repeatedly say I have a lot of issues, but to me that feels like there's more opportunity in that space, is if you embrace the idea of a participatory universe, where maybe we are the supercomputers, but we're more super than any nanomachine that could be designed. Our whole soul space and our psyche space and the love in our heart for our fellow beings and the world and the natural relatives and all the things like that, we are pretty amazing. That, to me, that gives a broader avenue to walk forward into the future than you're going to be micromanaged by AI bureaucrats and sensor networks, which, again, I was there before, but I kind of you know, and I'm not saying that's not a legitimate way of looking at it, but to me, it just didn't offer many opportunities. So I'm much more interested in the participatory side of things and then unpacking, okay, these people know stuff, right? The SRI people know stuff. The Macy Conference people know stuff. It's not simply to run MK Ultra and make sex slaves and assassins. It's something much bigger. It's about consciousness. It's about network consciousness. And yeah, I'm not going to be signing up for Melanie Swan's Cloud Mind, but I am kind of intrigued about what Melanie Swan knows, what the Natalie Smolenskys know, what the Dirk Helbing know about the quantum field and the physics of it and how it might work. And so to me, this idea of a playful participatory universe is more intriguing. And again, at some future point, someone may have a very pithy comment, or Steffers or Sean or Joseph or people who surround me may say, hey, wow, I just saw this paper with these people and they're thinking about it in this way. And then there might be a whole other layer of things that I'm investigating because, again, I have a soft spot in my heart for the interdimensional biofilm seeking novelty. I love novelty and I love to try to integrate it in. And so there are certain people who again, build lovely structures, narrative structures to inhabit that are very comfortable and give space and build community within those stories. And for me, I'm somebody out there wandering around like with the small band of folks that we intermittently mingle and bump up against each other and compare notes and then wander again. And that's just a different type. And I do, as I said before, I think the world deserves all the different types of people, all the different types of beings. I do think ultimately we are all part of a divine creation and we shouldn't be making everybody try to fit in the same unit. So if you want to pick Technocracy, sure. And I did that, like I said, out of the gate, my United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, my first big paper on that in March of 2020, and my first little video that my kitchen table, I'm talking about that. And that's me then. And then the Alison McDowell fall of 2024 is much more about quantum field participation and resonance with participatory environments. And then what does that mean in the Web3 world? Because again, I'm not co-signing Web3. I haven't like had an epiphany and all of a sudden like sign me up for a MetaMask wallet. That's not what I'm doing. But I also know that the people who have set up the MetaMask wallets know about the metaphysics, and the people at Bell Labs like know about the metaphysics, and the Hoskinsons and these people and Musk and all the different coins and the memetics, they know how it works. And so, yeah, I'm totally capable of reading between the lines and figuring out nuggets of how this operating system works. And that's where I'm at now. So again, take it for what it's worth. I've kind of put Technocracy over here. I've moved into complexity and emergence and holding space for whatever the next thing is that comes.